What is up, YouTube? Tonight we are talking about balloons and educating you on all the history of balloon science, from its humble beginnings with the French in 19th of September in 1783, where these brothers over in France decided to make a paper balloon and, burn a fire underneath it to fill it with hot air. These Chinese lanterns were probably known about for a longer time before that, smaller balloons, but they wanted to build one that was big enough to actually lift, people. And they did that. And then ever since then, I don't know when the first hydrogen balloon was, but the first balloons that they started using hydrogen gas were a next step in the technology much later on.
Won't forget Gusmão though, right? Because there's also Bartolomeu Gusmão was the Brazilian priest, but he's Portuguese colonial priest, and he built an airship in the 1600s. And there's a number of other examples of airships that were built. Now this obviously is more of a an artistic rendering later, but
the Vimanas in India also claim that they built airships that used gases and stuff like this too. So
right, and then there's the Peruvian airships, which there's examples of Peruvian airships. If I type in ancient,
were these for travel or atmospheric research mostly? Do you know? Like to get high up or to get
for instance, like Bolivia, where the mountains and the Andes, where the mountains are really high, an airship's really practical to get from one place to the other where it's really, really close, except that there's an ascent and a descent of thousands of feet between the two peaks, right? But the peaks are right next to each other. So, and people for a long time tried to doubt that there were airships, that the Peruvians had airships, but it's even into their culture to this day to have these flying squirrel suits, right? Have you seen the Bolivian or Peruvian?
I'm just thinking, would you want to find out what was up in the atmosphere, the original research, it seems like that doesn't exist until the 20s, which is bizarre to think that these people weren't trying to figure out what was up high, how high the atmosphere went,
I mean, what's also interesting is so places like in Bolivia, they have Sucre. Sucre is 13,000 foot elevation. So that's like base camp Mount Everest. And that's just their city. So if you think about it, they're so much higher up into the thinner air than we're used to being at any point. Also, that's something to consider.
Yeah, that makes it even harder to make hot air balloons according to the physics, though, because you want a denser fluid. The denser the air is, and the colder the air is, the hotter. The faster your hot air balloon will rise.
Right. So it calls into question what kinds of materials are they using, which is really interesting because then that asks you about the Silk Road, right? And there's so many places where the Silk Road, in places that have been called the Silk Road, where there isn't a lot of foot traffic, and we can look and see where there's been foot traffic for thousands of years, but it looks like what it's been is there's actually been silk balloons. There's silk balloons in certain places as well, which are
before they had airplanes. The only way to get aerial photographs was with balloons. So a lot of photographers would pay good money to get a balloon to go up in a balloon, and so there was aerial surveying and also aerial reconnaissance.
Civil War balloons. Can you imagine being one of those? Can you imagine being one of those kids? So let's say you're like a 17-year-old kid, and they're like, you got a special mission for you, and you think you're going to get a good promotion, and they put you in a freaking weather balloon experiment with these. I mean, they haul out these.
Well, it's a tether. You're tethered to the ground, but if that tether lets go, you're floating away to who knows where. And
so high up though, and cold, and you're not probably covering your ears, and it's just freezing, and you're supposed, and you're up in the sky looking, and what are you doing? You're looking.
They didn't have the ways to let air out too. If it was a gas balloon rather than hot air balloons would only stay up for so long, but a lot of these were gas filled balloons. They would react acids with
metal tanks. They would have these tanks.
If you put zinc pellets in hydrochloric acid, for example, it will make hydrogen gas. So they got
one tank of one gas and the other tank, and then they put them together to create the chemical reaction right in the balloon.
Yeah, we'll see.
Gas. I think you're forgetting about one thing though. Like you're talking about 13,000 feet, and if you look at the ionosphere and the magnetosphere and everything, whenever the mountains go up and you're at a higher elevation, that the magnetosphere actually goes over it. So is the air density really as thin as what it is whenever you're at a lower elevation, or is it adjusting?
I mean, all I know is when I was in Sucre, I would like
right?
feel like I was passing out. I would be like laughing.
That's a great,
I'd almost walk
a
across
great
the street.
question, and it leads to one of the interesting facts that the best place to watch to where the hot air balloons are every year is in a place called Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the winds of Mount Sandia actually create this perfect condition where the wind direction goes one way at a certain altitude and it goes the other way at a lower altitude. So the winds, blow like northeast at one altitude, and then the winds blow southwest at a different altitude. So if you want to change direction, all you have to do is drop ballast and raise your altitude, or drop your gas and lower your ballast, and then you'll drop your altitude, so you can go back. So that's what they do in the hot air balloon festival. So you look up hot air balloon.
They exposed us on. Remember the show Family Matters with Steve Urkel, and he got caught up in an air balloon, and he landed the air balloon right on the Wilson's front step, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just figured out the physics of it. If you raise and lower, you can direct your where you're going at."
Dude, I miss her.
To a certain extent, but the air currents aren't like that all over the globe. Albuquerque is like a very special case, and it's a perfect condition, which is why they
have a hot air balloon here in Central Jersey around September time usually. And I had some friends who were planning on going flying there. We fly paramotors to fly around them. That's a lot of fun.
Here in Santa Cruz and Carmel, you can get air balloons pretty regularly as well.
So why are we talking about balloons?
Well, I mean, they're pretty practical, and realistically, it's the kind of technology that we should be using. I mean, it looks like other people are using this.
Well, this is the real reason we're talking about balloons. Let's be honest.
Is this a good time for my meme? Just really quickly. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I got that done. Okay, I feel better now.
Also, if you
response to the U.S. balloon, Kim Kardashian and the U.S. have released their own spy balloon.
There you go. That looks dangerous. Placement.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's Photoshop. But
Kanye's so pissed right now watching.
It is Photoshop, but it has to be.
Check out those antennas.
I'm sorry, Kanye. You're always welcome on the show. I know you're on Tim Pool, and hopefully we'll be on Tim Pool again soon. They name dropped us on the show the other night, so I got to get back in touch with those guys and get back.
Yeah, you do.
What did they name drop you for? Can I ask what research was it that they referenced?
Ian's a good friend of mine, man. Well, he knows Andreas, and we just the last time I was on there talking about the U.S. Navy patents and the whole Salpaze thing and some of the research that's been done into that. But yeah, it's just a bunch of the research, because we've been doing this quite a while and know a lot about the history of this stuff. Going back to balloon scientists like Luis Alvarez.
What year is Alvarez from?
Alvarez was born in 1911, and he was famous for being one of the balloon scientists on Project Mogul, which were these spy balloon trains that were being built and released in the 1940s.
Not involved with.
Have you heard of Auguste Piccard from the 1930s?
Well, he was also appointed to Project Blue Book to be a Project Blue Book scientist. I think he was a Jason Defense Advisory Group scientist, member of the Bohemian Club.
Oof.
And also he was the guy that, came out with the U.S. Air Force and said that the Roswell crash was a Project Mogul weather balloon train, and, helped the U.S. Air Force with that, cover story, because, the balloons that they were using on these balloon trains were actually, I think, rubber or latex balloons. So
He's also really he's Chilean, so they went to the
these-
Chilean source of the eruption. So there's an eruption in Atapuerca, and him and his brother, I think it was, or was his father, came up with the Alvarez hypothesis, which is the reason a lot of people believe that there was a eruption that led to dinosaurs going extinct, because the Alvarez hypothesis is that there's a layer of iridium that has somehow coated the world that must have come from some sort of an extraterrestrial location, because there's no other source of iridium.
Interesting.
Except for at volcanoes.
What's the tensile strength of this this DuPont film?
So this is Bopet. It's a DuPont film that was developed in the mid 1950s, and this is Mylar. So Mylar couldn't explain the material that was reported the Roswell crash, because it wasn't invented for until a decade or half a decade later. So the memory foil that was reported at Roswell, so they say it was the radar target from the the weather balloons that they had, the Project Mogul weather balloons.
So that's a memory film. Does that have like any similarities to mercury? And
Well,
the
look up liquid crystal polymer when you have a second, also, because in relation to things like mercury or plastics like mercury, liquid crystal polymer is what they make Vectran out of, which is the shoe, the lunar gear or something shoe that they make. And this is bulletproof, but that's not saying much. Silk can be bulletproof. This is like particle proof. And what you can do is you can make this tube that inflates, right? So the idea is that if you made a spaceship that you shot up that was like a broom stick, and then it inflated into this giant room it would be made out of Vectran, liquid crystal polymer, that can expand.
Andreas, you have more experience in this with me. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see this hexagonal shape, and we all know like the hexagonal shape is like a great structure. They even do airdrops within the military, and this is an energy absorbing shape.
Bigelow was big on he was working on all these kinds of expandable space programs for NASA and stuff before they shut down in 2020.
The thing is, this material is so useful for so many things, and it's funny. Like, the way you do it is you make a shoe. Nike totally did it. Like, you make Vectran shoes, and then you can have this material, and this material you could build a house out of it. You know what I mean? Like, you can build a spaceship, you can build a Earth ship. It doesn't really a sea ship. Doesn't really matter. It's just that you can make this super thin, super expansive material.
How do you
that
spell
is so liquid crystal polymer, Vectran, Vectran. Type in that plus liquid crystal polymer, probably.
Looks like somebody branded it. Is it insulating?
It can be. So you can make different various liquid crystal polymers. Let me see if I can type in.
It's the second picture. That's the one I was looking up on Wikipedia.
Here, right here. Vectran is a manufactured fiber spun from a liquid crystal polymer created by a Celanese corporation and now manufactured by Curaray. It is an aromatic polyester produced by the polycondensation of 4-hydroxybenzoic acid and 6-hydroxynaphthalene 2-carboxylic acid.
Look at that thermal stability on the second paragraph. And this is the hexagonal shape I was talking about. So that means it's very strong, and it's creating a lot of thermal insulation on it.
Yeah, I love this stuff. I don't really like Nike, but I like these shoes. You know what I mean? I want this material. It's way cooler than Kevlar. They're comparing it to Kevlar, but don't let that fool you, because Kevlar is more like a ceramic plastic, and kind of glassy. And whereas this is, it can be woven into silk, fine material. So you can imagine the Lord of the Rings armor or something. It would be made out of Vectran.
So this is interesting.
So let's relate this to the current events of this Chinese spy balloon, because the latest talk among the experts is saying that this thing could maneuver and change directions and do so the Chinese were saying, oh, this is just something that blew off course. But now they're saying that, well, this thing was equipped with the ability, some more complex abilities and stuff. And I talked a little bit about this on a couple streams in the past, and other people brought up this this technology and said, "Oh, these things have the ability to shift their altitude so they can catch these high-end streams, and that they're able to, ride these wind currents." Like, I don't see any kind of fans or other stuff on this maneuverability, but there are technologies that you could apply
You
to
don't need
balloons.
fans. You definitely don't need. So this is the thing. Project Loon, if you're familiar with Google's Project Loon, and a lot of that information was made public. So China definitely has it, whether it's public or not. But you could get this information. Relies on exactly what you're
So
saying.
educate us on Project Loon.
So Google wanted to put and did put a bunch of balloons up, like a loony project, crazy project. What if we had these balloons everywhere that were able to communicate with each other? In fact, they could be communicating by measuring. They could be sending signal back and forth, creating an array mesh network. They could do all sorts of things. And as they travel, they can even lift and fall based on what chemicals are in there. We talked a bit about this project that I had worked on, solar balloons, back Ian and Ben. We worked on this idea of using ammonia NH3 balloons, which would, when the sun rises and sets, produce a chemical reaction ionizing the ammonia gas, which lifts the balloon. And so it goes to a certain level that follows a certain current. But you'd be able to actually control this. That's basically what Google was doing with these balloons. And if you go even weirder, it was the laser internet. Let me see if I can find.
How does that control it? How can you control the buoyancy of the balloon just based upon the sun coming out whenever you don't know exactly what's coming?
So you can, in the sense that you can actually have chemical tinting of the plastics, so it can control when it gets ionization, and you can just decide when you want it to lift and when you want it to fall. Basically, you have control over the altitude of the balloon, and then that allows you to follow certain wind currents. And because all the wind currents are measured by this huge mesh network, that it knows exactly where it can be carried. So pretty well, it can be drifted into a current and then taken to where it needs to go. It might take slightly longer than a plane, but again, it's a balloon that's up there for years at a time and just gets where it needs to go without any fuel.
And this is why I think like space probes would be similar to a balloon, which is, makes sense where they found all that balloon type, memory foil stuff. It could have been a part of a balloon, like some kind of alien space probe balloon.
So they're building these laser guided systems that they send internet by mesh network from one balloon to another, and it actually shoots a laser directly across from one balloon to the other balloon.
It's like Starlink,
but it's balloon link, and it's way
link. Well, that's how to get over the horizon and set up a OTH, communications grid. That's, again, if with direct laser link, a setup array like that, then it's uninterruptible. But it's still, if you got to go through atmosphere. But if these balloons are super high altitude balloons, you're getting above those stratosphere.
Yeah, these can be 30, 60,000 feet easily. And the material, again, we don't even know what some of these materials are made out of, because we just know Vectran's one of the examples of liquid crystal polymers. There's so many, there's thousands of them that we've worked with in labs that are more interesting.
They can basically, that's like a ballast control, a very, very lightweight ballast control switch. So the idea is, but with balloon technology, is you're just it's basically like lift versus drag, your overall volume of your craft. But it's basically a problem of lift versus weight. How much weight do you have, and how much lift do you have? And then, so your payload here in this case is this this satellite solar panel array. Sorry, it looks like a satellite. It looks like the ISS space station or something.
It's basically,
it really does. What was hanging off that?
It's a clone of a CubeSat, from what I could tell. I mean, granted, we've only seen from one angle, but a CubeSat is basically this. You've got an Android run system a lot of the time. It's got solar panels on all sides that can be extended. It's just a simple CubeSat. And these are really easy to manufacture. It's basically like a micro PC. They're usually solid state. You might have a Raspberry Pi, you might have another system, but the most interesting thing about the CubeSat is that you can have so many different sensors connected to it, like the Arduino microcontroller processing. And so it's able to pick up on where it is, what the weather's like, etc. And also, okay, so here's the thing I was thinking about. Flipper Zero, because we're talking to Matt here, and Matt's got one of these. So imagine what China's got. This is the cute Japanese version. Like, imagine the scary Chinese version of Flipper Zero. Flipper Zero is this thing that scans all the signals and records them. So like, let's say here, you got one right there. Let's pull up Matt's.
Oh, I got the add-on because I actually have
cool.
the dev board on it.
Wow, that's awesome. So imagine though, like if he was,
Nice.
if this was, imagine the evil like version of this, and it's in a balloon, and it flies over parking lots across Canada and America and stuff, and just records how to open people's car doors and people's houses and whatever smart signals it's got, it's able to connect to. So I mean, that's kind of another thing I imagine is coming. Is it's going to be used to record you've got all these Wi-Fi cameras and everything, and all these Wi-Fi access points. If it goes over the place, and
I heard rumors that when Google drives around with their cars and they have they have the camera that does the street view, because how do they get the street view pictures, right? There's a Google car, and I've seen them driving around, and if you see it driving around, there's a chances are you can go look up that street view and you'll be in the picture.
Absolutely.
And too, so they drive around, but I heard rumors that they also they find unsecure Wi-Fi networks, they find all that, and they keep track of it, and they log it all. And they probably have Flipper Zero or something like that already.
That's what I used to do as a kid. So growing up in Silicon Valley, I used to have chalk, and I would go around and I would mark people's walls when I was like a teenager, 12 to 10, 12, 13, 14, for Wi-Fi networks, because Wi-Fi was kind of new at the time. And you'd put an X on a wall that needed to be opened, and a circle on a wall that had an open network, and you'd put a line through a wall that you'd had or check mark rather, to remove part of the X if you'd found your way into some network, and you'd put it into one of the local BBS boards or forums to share. Then today, driving around Santa Cruz, I saw one of these. So Google has these guys. These are these cars that don't have steering wheels, and there's usually somebody like working on his laptop sitting in this thing as it's driving him around. And all it takes is going by somebody's house while somebody's logging in or logging out to record the handshake, right? Because the way all technology works is encryption is the Masonic secret.
Just like the people that hacked Facebook realized it was all based on these tokens that were exchanged, and
you basically just record the
I can do that.
Learn how to do it, and that's how you open someone's phone. Exactly.
Okay, but
I can do that on this with the Marauder software. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The Chinese said that this is just a weather balloon. If they wanted to infiltrate our systems, if they want to infiltrate America, they just use Tictoc.
Or hardwired security, like the bugs that are hardwired. All are Chinese manufacturing.
There's fax machines that if you copy something too many times, it sends it off to their masters.
Look up the Hikvision.
I think the point is that weather balloons have always been the most.
All the Hikvision security cameras are banned from hospitals, government facilities, everything, because they're made in China, and they were hardwired with a chip right on the motherboard of all the cameras, the IP cameras, all the NVRs, that has a call home function, that any network time it plug into a network, it tries to call home to China and link up with the Chinese network to send data about the security cameras and from all Hikvision. And they're, as a result, they were banned in all hospitals and federal.
That was a big thing. So I had some friends who worked at Lockheed when the fires in California hit a couple years ago, and it was interesting because there'd been a big security breach, and the idea that the Chinese had been in the Bay Area and gone through Lockheed and all this stuff. And so what they said was that at the Lockheed building, that there was no fire, but that the building itself had burned, and it was scorched black, like in a square around the building, like it had burned from the inside out to completely destroy anything that was inside the building. So there was a lot of talk about, whoa, what did we get ourselves into? The Chinese have been so deeply entwined with us. And, that was during who was the president, right? Like somebody who wasn't really super Chinese friendly. And now we have a new, more Chinese allied president who's kind of, by telling Blinken not to go or not making these deals, what we're saying is we're not going to defend Taiwan. It's like a very clear, consequential path that we're allowing China to do their thing to Taiwan. We're essentially, we're being neutral in a moving train. So clearly we're at this point, right? This precipice where that became a question. Are we or are we not friends with that balloon today? Has
believe it's
Oceania
more
always been at
so-
war with Europa? You know,
I believe it's more so the script always flips whenever it comes to politics. Like you'll see something, and I base everything on the news media. Like you think it's going to be big and everything is going to be released 2 years later. That's when it happens, and the script always flips after that. So if we're looking at being friends with China, I think that like the UAPs are actually Department of Defense of the United States. And if we come into conflict, that's whenever it comes out, because no other country is addressing UAPs or anything else publicly except for the United States. And it's just a show of like strength.
Yay.
I feel like that with the fact this balloon path, like let's look at the path again. Hold on. So the balloon goes around Alaska by Japan. There's no way that this is going beyond Alaska through NORAD without the United States knowing about it. So at this point, we already know that China and the United States were allied at this point, and Biden was cool with it. Then it goes across Canada. We all know what Canada is doing. We all know Trudeau. Like, it's obviously that they're allied with China. They're not really defending Taiwan. And they sometimes say something, but that's about it.
This thing flew right over Bernie's house and took pictures of it.
Which
I
is
saw Bernie
more
on
to the
Google
point.
Maps from that balloon.
Dude.
Oh
Bernie,
my.
what were you wearing? God.
You're just gonna have to wait to see when they release it, I guess.
Wait for the leak, dude. It'll be on the.
It will be leaked. Bernie out in his polar bear suit, maybe. Good old Canadian winter. There's a lot of speculation that they probably had a LiDAR mapping on this balloon. What do you think are the possibilities of that, Jeremy or Mark?
Well, there's a lot of interesting laser technologies that are out there, including laser.
I mean, you could do that from space. There's no need for that. There was a lot of antennas on it.
They can do laser guidance too. This is a patent.
Okay, so there's certain things you can't do from space. I want to point out if you use LiDAR. Well, no, you don't have to use my page. I was just going to say, if you use LiDAR from 60,000 feet, you can see underground. And so that would be the main reason you would want to be closer, is that you could use it for penetrating LiDAR.
Yeah. So lasers are also, you can have laser emitting diodes, which are very lightweight, and it's much less.
I think it could penetrate the canopy, but it can't penetrate underground.
What were they using for the?
I don't know enough about these systems though. I'm still like learning a little bit about them.
LiDAR can penetrate trees because it hits it a bunch of times. It'll get in between the leaves, but it can't penetrate ground.
So what they do is they have a system of about 12 usually different kinds of radio, 35.75 gigahertz radar payload system operating the 6U CubeSat for the Rain Cube design. This is kind of the basic way you would, you would do this, and then you'd be able.
That is not ground penetrating at those frequencies.
I'm super curious. Like it all depends on what you're looking for and what you're spying on. If you're just looking for the weather, then you're going to have a different set of sensors on it than if you're looking to look for underground military bases, and scan underground.
Right.
Scan the ground for underground stuff. Versus, if you're going to put, what kind of sensors am I going to put on this thing? If I'm, thinking of as a scientist, it's going to be different.
Those are like, those look like 80 megahertz antennas at the end. That would be for communicating and hopping off of the ionosphere. For those who have ham licenses.
Yeah. It's probably got some OTH
like
horizon.
A quarter wave 80 meter antenna.
It's probably beaming those signals. It's probably collecting data or intelligence.
I actually communicated with somebody on 20 meters from here to Australia once when the conditions were just good. And I talked to Israel as well on the same day. So we had the ionosphere charged up, and you can bounce signals off of the ionosphere and back. And that's probably how they were communicating with this thing, using either 20 or 80 megahertz.
Yeah,
do clouds disrupt that, or can they
data?
help that?
No, the cloud, it'll go straight through the clouds, and when the sun burps, it charges up the ionosphere, and that becomes like a mirror for the signal. So you're able to communicate past the horizon. Sometimes you're able to communicate all the way around the world.
So this translates back into Tesla technology on wireless electricity through the ionosphere. So they're using that carrier wave
resonance
signal.
Not through, against the ionosphere, bounces it off.
Like on the barrier of it.
It acts as a mirror and bounces it off. You just have hops.
I think also it makes me really want to start digging into Montana more because, like, obviously there's some underground awesome base in Montana. Like, that's just
There's a lot of out in that area, like those northern states and stuff. There's a lot of missile silos, a lot of ICBM like launch sites because it's a good vantage point to go right over the North Pole to get to that to get to China or Russia. You know, it's a strategic position within the U.S. and elsewhere. And there's a lot of farmland and open space out there too, where you'll just be driving along these cornfields out there, and then like all of a sudden it's like,
there we go.
There's another missile silo.
Waste the
NSA builds the
atmosphere then?
largest data farm in Montana. There we go. So,
Oh boy.
So I mean, come on. I think that gives you that's like a
zettabytes of information.
truffle
That's a
pig.
target.
Send the truffle pig that direction. You know.
That's a target.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then it's no
What
longer,
types
and
of
again,
things
that's
could
more like the Echo Flipper than it is. And it doesn't need necessarily go underground per se, you know. Also, what you have to do is you just have to scan the balloon over. Hopefully, you pick up somebody who lives in the Pine Gap like towns, like data. You get into their phone, and there's something like that, and then from there they can get someone else who's on the ground to get in. Because there's so many things here. They have all these different things. They already have data centers here. The Chinese already have companies and apps and things already in the United States. So they just need to work with their tech. I mean, that's what it seems like.
Oh boy.
Well, another question is, it looked, or I heard something about there being like small, like little rocket boosters or something like that, or jet things on this, like so that it could alter its trajectory that way. Did you guys hear anything about that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Maneuverability for them. If I was going to engineer a balloon, I would not use a chemical-based propellant like that because it's weight. Weight, for example, is one, and you know, it takes the storage for compressed gas. I mean, it's like it's a lot of weight and stuff. So I was talking about this. Back room and get that cell.
It does, if it's a CubeSat, it does have
Right
a
in the
really
back
small fan on it. I don't think the fan's really pushing it that like
the
much.
plastic thing that might
Theoretically, there could be a small amount of push just from the fan, but also the fact that it's lifting and moving. Look at the path it followed. This isn't like a majorly off course path. It's following the natural course.
Yeah,
you know?
it looks like almost lacing in the atmosphere. Could they put elements in the atmosphere that help it travel along easier? Like,
I mean,
like
the
I
atmosphere
said,
already has
if you can easily build these things with these liquid crystal polymers and electric, you know, you run a current across it and it shrinks the size of the balloon so that it will make the balloon go up or down in altitude.
right.
So that's an advantage
That's true
there
too.
because there's different wind streams at different altitudes. This is exactly why Albuquerque is the choice spot for ballooning, because the wind directions are in opposites and it's right at a perfect height of like, you know, like 1,000 feet. So you just, you know, ride either side of that and you can go back and forth all day. It's real convenient, but yeah, you could ride these wind currents to a certain degree. But if I were going to do it, I would use like I would use Biefeld Brown effect, or these you know, where you just have a different current, a charge current, electrostatics, which electrostatic propulsion, especially in these wind currents where it's just a long range, slow kind of effect, it would be advantageous to build this kind of technology and not that hard. I mean, this is off the shelf technology.
And meanwhile, Facebook has these, right? Which these things can fly for 18 months at a time, and they're gliders. Once they launch them, then they just stay up, and they have Wi-Fi. They have basically all the same features as the balloon does, but they're cruising, and then they have several flight paths, and they're gliding on wind currents. So
is that a prop at the front?
Do you know
or
who
is
it
that
does have
the
a prop
expert
at the front.
glider?
It does have a prop at the front, but the prop is powered by the
ultralights, and if they want to rise, they can also ride thermals, just like Falcon, like birds do, to save energy, because birds can soar to
right. There's a great Disney movie. Have you ever seen The Boy from the Condors?
Also,
Yeah,
this is
glider
actually
thing.
Walt Disney made this movie, I believe, about LRH. But what this is the true story of a boy who got into gliders in California, and to pass your gliders test, you had to fly like 500 miles in a glider without an engine. So what they do is they tow you, and they tow with the truck up. He gets up into the sky.
I flew in one once. I got
the only
towed
reason
up
this
in a glider and flew in one.
this
Yeah.
guy would have died
12,
because
20.
like he's going into the fog canyon, but eventually he sees a condor and he's like, oh man, they know what to do. So he just follows the condors as they follow the paths. And that way he doesn't crash into the cliff. And true story, flew 500 miles, survived it. And so it became like kind of at the time, it was a big deal.
Yeah,
There was
Larry
another
flying
movie by
gliders at
Disney that was
11
like this,
years
where
old.
he flew the geese home, and he
Fly
was on
away
like
home.
a,
Oh,
I don't know if that was a Disney movie, but that is also a pretty weird and important true story. And that involves the UN unseating bird preserves on islands in order to take over certain spots in order to create these. But this is what's part of this idea of Technogionism. So Technogionism is this idea that we can make the world technology all part of the same thing. So natural technology. And so if these things are flying on natural currents and eventually nature can produce the materials themselves, then it becomes part of nature and it's no longer super out there or weird anymore. The seeds are being deposited on the wind currents by these robo birds that we're creating, right? And that is part of nature at a certain level. So I mean, it's not necessarily evil to create these balloons, right? The thing is what they're being used for per se that kind of scares me.
When did they stop using balloons to launch satellites?
Oh, they still do it actually. CubeSat balloon launch. I just
they
saw
have those
one.
mini nuclear powered.
Yeah,
balloons.
space startup aims to launch CubeSats on balloon lofted rockets. There's a bunch of companies. Leo Aerospace is one of the ones that's been doing it. Yeah, if I go back, I'll find there's more.
So what happens to the balloon after they launch it? Or they just launch it in a lower atmosphere that they have to have the thermal activity up on the gases inside the balloon to keep it up?
I think one of the things is that if you launch a balloon to a certain height and then you've got a pressurized chemical fuel, you can launch a rocket from the balloon to get it beyond the distance the balloon can't penetrate. And there's a number of different ways that they've worked on that. There's also this idea of electrostatic tethering, that you can produce enough electroionic lift at a certain atmosphere that then you could just use the energy in the ionosphere to propel yourself up once you're already up there. So, but you can launch CubeSats.
Graphene drones.
Graphene space elevator, or the graphene space tether, right? The idea of building a space tether is interesting because, and the term space, but just basically if you hit the ionosphere with a tether and it's grounded, the amount of energy produced from friction so much that it melts anything that we've ever thrown at it. Like NASA in 1998 put these like super cables that were bigger than redwood trees up and this giant cable, and it took like less than I think it was 1.8 seconds, and it started to glow so hot red white that it just boiled and snapped instantly. And so the amount of energy that you're storing, it's so much more than we've ever dealt with. It's all the energy that humanity's ever used in a second, basically all the time. And we need
but free energy doesn't exist.
It's just so dangerous also because like we haven't figured out how to capture just some of that. That's the other thing.
I don't know. I mean, I put up a YouTube video just the other day that was capturing stuff out of the magnetosphere.
I don't know. What are we going to do, man? What are we going to do?
I guess we just have to depend upon oil and war and everything else.
Yeah, and taxes.
Well,
how much did you end up pulling out of that, Matt?
So I didn't measure the total, but I mean, it was jumping like 110 volts, everything.
Dude, a Rife River pump too.
Yeah, so you can look up the video on Real Rife Technology on my YouTube channel. And Hunter and I did this again. We went up 1,000 feet, and Hunter, he was wearing gloves this time. He actually got hurt. So we're not doing it anymore. This was a really quick video.
And one can use a balloon instead of a drone, and then you don't need to actually be using any sort of energy other than the balloon's buoyancy to get harvest it and work the system.
So
yeah.
So he's wearing leather gloves. He's got thick insulated shoes. And I don't suggest anybody do this because he was actually really scared and I had him ground out and everything. And whenever I'm grounding this, you have to remember I'm grounding to a galvanized piece. This is a clothes hanger, like T-shape. I forget what it's called, but it's only like 2 foot in the ground in sand. And you'll see me stick like the other end of the electrical meter in the ground, and it's still doing like the same amount of grounding out.
All right, I found a cool balloon story right here.
These designs are similar to the what they use to go on the deep dives in the ocean too. It's interesting because it's the same designer. I don't know how they're interrelated, but
Is this a balloon or a drone? No,
This is a drone taking up one of my Royal Rife coils. So it has no open points on it. Everything's sealed off. It's double enameled, and I'm still capturing more energy than what I could with the bare copper net.
Have you ever
You can
guys?
probably fast forward a little bit because until I zoom in, it takes a little bit of a minute.
They built this blimp with 4 helicopters on it. Speaking of balloons, it was called the Paseki Helistat, and they built it for heavy lifting so they could combine the dynamic, buoyancy capabilities of a blimp with the lifting power of a helicopter. So here are the 4 helicopter bodies on this thing as they wheeled it out for its, this test flight. But it was built to like be able to lift really, really heavy payloads. For
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the size differential here between these and a CubeSat, I mean, at first I was thinking it was kind of silly to suggest this, but I said it anyway. The fan, like the cooling fan on a CubeSat, would operate a bit like a bit of a propulsion system, and so
Or
it
if
could give you
put
some glide.
4 rotor motors on it, right? Like the old Zeppelins and stuff, how they were able to steer them.
Well, they probably
That's what they're
have
doing right
4. They probably have 4 propellers if it's a CubeSat, because that's the system for how it keeps itself cool. So, but the way it would work is the air is pulled in. So as the air is pulled in, it would be pushed out the back of it. So that would give it a bit of a propulsion.
Yeah, I mean, it's pulling it in from the front too, which is drawing it up.
well, there it crashes.
Well, yeah. That way, and the idea here is to make sure you don't accidentally think that it makes sense for you to have free energy. Because if you used a balloon, then that'd be crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, look at the mechanical structure of this. Why are they leaving it so blank on the back end when they know it's going to be pulling forward and it's going to have
This
draw
was a
on the
horrible
rear?
design of how they mounted those.
Yeah, well,
Did that.
It feels like they messed it up on purpose, but I don't know.
I was just about to ask that. Like,
some people are dumb. I mean,
police
the thing I
sabotage?
have to remind myself is like, so I met a lot of people that work in engineering that aren't really brilliant. So it's totally possible.
Rewind that a little bit and watch how all 4 of them fall at the same time.
Yeah, just
that does.
craters.
All right, Rife. You know what though? That's interesting because it's so screwed up synchronistically.
It's
that
so
it almost
perfect.
feels like perfectly wrong. Yeah.
It's the perfect storm.
God.
Similar
It looks
to the
so impressive of a mess up.
Hindenburg disaster. Almost.
Yeah.
Well, Hindenburg disaster was the diesel engines, right? So that wasn't even.
Oh,
really...
the thermite paint on the hull. They painted it with that aluminum paint, and it had like the the aluminum particles in it, then aluminum nanoparticles for the paint, and like the iron oxides.
Lest we forget the Sonora Air Club, right? So in the 1800s into the early 20th century, there were all of these Germans that were working on these airships designs, and the Sonora Air Club was building airships all across America, and you can find the NIMSA group, right? And NIMSA people that were building airships, and newspaper reports, like someone landed in their experimental airship in Kentucky in 1811, someone lands in 1790, and so it's constantly more airships than we're ever told. We're always like, oh, there's not that many airships. It must have been this crazy experiment.
1790. Haven't you ever heard of the Wright brothers? That was like 1800s. They were the first people to create flight.
Yeah, and that was also funny for Ripley's Believe It or Not, because Ripley got in trouble because someone said, oh, the first person to fly across the Atlantic. It's like, don't you mean the 39th? And because he's also and if you count 41st person, because you said first man. but there were women on the Zeppelin before that. And he shows like 20, 30 years earlier, Zeppelins have been flying back and forth twice.
Now this is a different design. If you go back, you'll see 6 blades on those helos.
Another thing is
those,
the
and
Zeppelin,
that's U.S. Navy, and the other one's U.S. Forest Service.
a difference between a balloon airship and a Zeppelin is a Zeppelin refers to the name of the original Zeppelin designer, but also the metal frame. So there's a metal frame inside of this balloon that's keeping its shape, and that's the main difference.
Yeah, the rigid body versus the inflatable.
But the
body,
thing
yeah.
is, these differences matter so much less now because you can make materials that bend like brace wire, right, out of plastics. So you basically can build the frameage into the plastics now.
Yep.
You could have a briefcase with a Zeppelin in it.
Can we do that?
Someday.
Yeah, for sure. Out of graphene and some sort of a really thin film.
I don't know if could you do it? Like, would that be enough to lift you? Because
yeah, I mean, you could definitely the size of it and the ultralight quality. The main question would be also you often want some
James
displaced,
Bond, dude. You just go to the rooftop and open my briefcase and fly away.
but you need some
ultralight
displaced
is what?
density. So you
125
can
pounds below, you don't have to have a pilot's license. Is that what it is?
right, yeah. And also, if you don't have an engine, is a thing about experimental gliders. So not having an engine is really useful because you could really just have shoes with like something on them.
A map showing the general locations of the Minutemen 3 silos in the United States.
So right over where
Yeah.
all that balloon was.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The Minutemen silos.
And how did it take them getting all the way into Montana for NORAD to like find it and identify it? If it's,
I feel like it had.
supposedly
Who
from
discovered
China
it first? Was
across
it?
the ocean?
Did NORAD point it out,
Sneaky.
or was it some like freedom, like some sovereign citizen people in Montana that looked at it? I don't
And
think it
probably
was originally
UFO
China.
people. Then they
Yeah.
were like, we got to.
I think Biden was going to let it happen because China does what they want to do, and we just let it happen because we're supposed to have these relationships, and the scientific community is supposed to transcend military, and we're sharing information, and we're pretending that they give us disclosure of the information that they collect. And
Well, if you look at the latest, like the press briefing by the U.S. military, they said, well, where is this balloon? He said, I'm not going to give you an hour by hour, but I'll give you like a general location. He said, but if people really want to know, people have the freedom to look up. So they could obviously see the balloon.
Yeah, like it was visible the entire time with the naked eye. That's what blows my mind is like the claim that it came across the ocean and like through Oregon or Washington or even British Columbia, Canada. It wasn't identified at all through all of that and then made it into Montana before all of a sudden it's spotted and becomes an issue. Like that doesn't fly with me.
Well, what does fly are Chinese spy balloons.
well, I know it's been said before, but I just wanted to like make sure the harp on the point, the Japanese weather balloons, because our introduction to World War II really centers around the Japanese balloons that threatened the American sky, which was like not real. First, there were lanterns that were probably made by the U.S. government, and they pretended the Japanese kids were sending lanterns across the sea just to make us feel the imminency of a world threat when you're just so isolated from any problem. And then from there, the Japanese balloon, which might have been real, but I mean, what exactly were they collecting with the Japanese balloon? It just seems kind of like a suspicious story. And it flew over the skies of Montana in 1944. So Matt had said something like, it kind of reminds me of a ritual. Like, okay, here we are at that schedule again. We're back to the Montana balloon story.
Yeah, it's the same tricks over and over and over again, kind of like the passports in 1980 and also Cuban Missile Crisis upon nuclear.
Well, let's go back a little ways to World War II, where there was an Asian balloon that floated over Los Angeles and was fired upon by, anti-aircraft guns in our military. All the spotlights of, Beverly Hills and were brought
this
out.
is a weird one.
uh,
The Battle of Los Angeles. So what
Yeah.
the heck do you think? Because like Mark was talking about this
Well,
earlier.
the
What do you think
military
this
said it was a balloon. I mean, so
I mean, a
obviously,
weather balloon. This is. Are we back to the Men in Black thing again? I mean,
it was a Japanese spy balloon that
what's this?
was
What's it?
bulletproof.
What's it called? I mean, or is
Wait,
it?
it was bulletproof?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay.
It sounds. Think how ridiculous that sounds. Come on now.
What did they? But that's the question. Is like, what did
What
they think
was
this
it?
Japanese spy balloon is supposed to be collecting? What kind of data do they think this Japanese spy balloon is getting? Is it sending it back, or it just seemed to me like they're pretending it's a Japanese balloon? It could be something else. It's just crazy. This is a couple years before the Japanese balloon. So it
UFO.
feels. Yeah. Look at that. What is it? What are we looking at here?
That looks like a
Aliens.
disc craft to me.
I mean, it would take a lot of time in that time period to be able to set up spotlight to go into the same angle to like the latitude and longitude to light that up.
Pretty crazy, man. And these are the pictures we get of it, which are kind of not a
That's
lot.
more intimidating the one that we are seeing today. That's for sure.
I mean, it's
I don't
way
know, man.
better of a trick.
I'd rather have the identified Chinese spy satellite balloon, with balloon
Oh, yeah.
thingy, than this
Sure. For
these
sure.
things showing up, man.
I mean, the fact is, and you know this more than anybody, Jeremy, is that the laser guided balloon system that's coming, like projectors on balloons. I don't know why I'm finding these cute party balloon tricks, but if I
Well,
type
they even
military,
said,
will that
like,
help?
Like this one, they're like, the military can't shoot it down because they can't shoot it down. But the new spy balloon, they can't shoot it down because they don't want to damage it. They want to capture it intact. So that was that's the big problem with them trying to, intercept these balloons so that we can, and what they really want to be able to do is intercept the balloon and send bad intelligence back somehow.
Camouflage technology, though. I mean, the kinds of things we've seen, like the invisible jets and everything else. Yeah, Stefan. Jean Picard was a Swiss high-altitude balloonist whose wife may have been the first woman in space. Star Trek
August
likely named
Picard.
after this guy. Yeah, for sure.
August
Jean-Luc
is
Picard
the
is
one.
named after him.
Jean Picard is the one that went deepest in the sea in the Challenger in 1948, I think. 1931 is August Picard, who went the highest in the atmosphere. But yeah, the whole Picard family, the Swiss Picards, are insane in their research in atmospheric and deep ocean. Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, they're my favorite balloon people. But yeah, cool. Glad your people know about that stuff.
Wow.
Yes, the video. They have videos of his first, like, his big flight.
I mean, if they can project though from
Theory.
the sky any sort of visuals, and they can hit clouds with lasers and project anything, then you don't need to see anything that's above anything. It's moving super fast, and so any of these balloons are basically invisible and innocuous. That they can stick around for a long period of time, and they can just sort of record everything going on. That's the best way for them to have access to all of your data.
Yeah, because I mean, the Chinese have the subsonic missiles that can go all the way around the globe, but it's not stationary in one period. So you can do 0-day attacks or anything else and collect all kinds of data.
There is a really interesting conspiracy theory about the subterranes, which is that the Soviet Union did build, and this part's true for sure, subterranes, which are these drills, and they embedded them into the California coastline. But the story goes that they've lost track of them, don't have control of them anymore, and that there's just a number of nuclear warheads that have been drilled into the California coastline, just kind of abandoned from the 70s and 80s.
Oh, I've never heard this.
So
are these like drilling, like,
are they like on the San Andreas fault, like ready?
Yeah, totally. And it's like the idea is like they didn't have enough future in nukes, and they were trying to come up with a be all end all, like, hey, just stop it, kind of a thing. But then the Soviet Union kind of collapsed, and so they don't necessarily have control over some or ways to access some of these anymore. They're just there. But there's also the Soviet San Bruno, California. Like in San Bruno, California, they brought tons of Soviets, and there's always like terrorist attacks, houses blowing up, crazy spy espionage things going on because deadly gas explosions, right? Because the Soviets were brought in. They said, hey, if we don't bring them in, then the Afghanis or the Saudis are going to get them. So we have to pay to bring the Soviet citizens, scientists into and keep them somewhere. And they brought them here. And so there's just a ton of Soviet scientists that end up in San Bruno, and it's right by the airport in San Francisco. And there's supposed to be underground tunnels and drills. It's a major area for underground. So the idea that the Soviets have been there and that they have control of this underground access point in San Bruno.
Oh God, Elon Musk is messing up then.
Oh, and that's also where there is a boring company, like one of the first boring company things in San Bruno.
Yeah. Wow.
That's sketchy.
All right, so you got any more balloon stuff left or anything left for balloons? Because I'm about to wrap up my stream. I think we covered a ton of. We nerded out on balloons hard for an hour, and I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has learned a lot from all this. And
I'd like to know your thoughts on them using a missile to shoot it down, as opposed to just like their like a gut, the whatever type of gun the F-22 has, but like some sort of machine gun, like bullets or whatever. Why would they use a air-to-air missile just to pop a balloon? And why not show off
like a tether or a net? We need to net it in or capture it. Oh, I thought we scared all the girls off. There she is.
Brittany's still here.
I think they just want to downplay technology all the time. They're like, we'll just pop a balloon in front of people because that's how dumb people are. We literally they have no idea what's going on. They think there's a balloon above them. They're worried about the balloon. Pop the balloon. Problem solved. Like, it's so weird how dumb the world can be. I'm sorry.
It's cool. Actually, thinking about the people that actually were in the manned balloon flight. So they obviously made it so that they could just be unmanned, but it's exciting.
And the woman balloon flight.
It looked large enough that it could like legitimately carry someone, or like someone could stay in a pod on it or something like that. Like.
Well, also these balloons are like the 3 school buses.
There's something with Rolex watches too, by the way. Sorry, with the research and funding it for the atmospheric and deep ocean dives too. If you look in, not right now, but just your viewers, if they look into like the commercials and promotion of Picards and doing that stuff. So something
sun
with the Rolex
sensor, wind sensor. All the different sensors. It's like, so you don't even need people because you've got these machines. They can see things, they can hear things, measure things, and you pop one balloon, and how many thousands? I think there's 60,000 loons. And you think the Chinese didn't make that material? I'm pretty sure there's more balloons out there. And
not only that, but you can go to Chat GPT and program an Arduino to do all this.
Right. This is basically what a CubeSat is built on the Arduino system. So it's all open source, and you can plug in and play. You can build your own. And yes, the easiest way to launch it is in a rocket. It's a balloon. And then you can get this stuff to a certain elevation where even without the balloon, with electrostatic, it should just stay up there. So that's the other interesting thing, is that there probably are more of these. They're just floating around.
I'd like to build ones with like a power cell that you could power, but basically fly it around with electrostatics, like Biefeld-Brown effect.
Wow.
That would be
There's these crystal salt. Was it the nuclear battery? Nuclear.
You see the battery we made?
They're recycling these batteries by taking. So
you can put you put fluids in there, and the pH gradient across there will create a voltage just from a differential in pH. So you can 3D print this and
nice.
Wow.
Can you explain this a little bit more? Like, what's your catalyst in the middle?
I'll go into that a little bit later behind the scenes, because
okay.
But you can build these. I think there's a video out there on it, but I'll talk to you about how the construction of it and go into it a little bit more, but not right now. I'm gonna jump off here, guys, and
for sure, I'll
close.
end it on your channel. Xirtus, you still down for going for another hour on?
Yeah, we can go a little bit longer. Let's do it.
Okay, and then
Jeremy, though, it's an
Good.
awesome.
I
I'm
have
glad
some
you're here.
questions. Thank you.
much
Yeah,
love,
thank you
Jeremy.
guys for
See you, Jeremy.
Mark, everyone over at Falcon Space, and next Saturday, Jeremy, we're on with the Hutchinsons for the crystal battery cells, or what day would work best for you next weekend?
I will keep you posted on that. For right now, I have to see because I'm coming back on Friday.
Okay.
So we'll figure that out.
For sure. It'll be one of the days next weekend.
Yeah, one of the days next weekend, and I got to get some. I want to do more with the right. We got to do more like into this Rife technology and some of these experiments on that. And
Looks like it's coming now. Yeah, we're about to be doing it.
Yeah,
Experiments are here.
Jeremiah actually got the gold unit today, and I was talking to him on the phone for a bit. Andreas, I don't know if yours got delivered. I can check it really quick if you'd like.
Brittany's gonna go to the post office and make sure, or did you go to the PO box?
And
we'll see.
I thought it was coming to.
I'll just say if it was
David.
delivered to the address or not. But I know
I sent him a
Jeremiah
link
got
to
his
join.
today,
I
and him
sent
and I
him a
were
link
going
to
over
join.
some
Maybe
things.
he'll join after
Yeah, Jeremiah's probably
I think-
got
yeah, I
that
think he
all
will.
ready to go. I
check
hope.
your email, Jeremiah, and join up.
Depending what he's
Yeah,
doing,
hopefully-
he's like,
You meet text him?
Should I end it on your channel now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna close it down.
Everybody,
Thank you
make
for
sure
watching, guys.
subscribe
On
to
Alien.
Jeremy Rys.
Yep.
And it's still live on Crypto Alchemist and on Xirtus channels, which I'm posting in the live chat. And it is about to end on Alien Scientist.
Make sure you guys subscribe to Alien Scientist, and also
Exactly.
we'll be back to talk more with Jeremy. I want to get to talk to you more about molten salt nuclear batteries because I think it's interesting the idea of you take the recycled
thorium.
nuclear salt